I don't get it.
Welcome, everyone. There is breakfast on the side of the stage. Please feel free to help yourself. More coffee. There's also orange juice.
I know, right? Gotta find it. Oh, here it is. Tracy, it's right here. You can. I went on an adventure. I was going to work. I just came up. You've already been to the office. Wow. Yeah. It's a transient sound, isn't it? Yeah. Amazing. What is your title? You know, when they ask about, when they ask this question, how is your
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. So if you want to grab some breakfast, some coffee, orange juice, and find your seats, we'll be getting going in just a couple minutes.
Former employee. Well, that's the ironic thing. Is it's summertime and it's hard to get a hold of Rashawn. It's hard to know what to do with his 10-month employment contract deal. He's on our committee. But on the other hand, because of the SACS thing that's due in September, I'm writing about strategic planning right now. So I'm talking about you more than I'm meeting with you. Talking about Benny and the other task forces more than I'm meeting with them. So. Oh, yeah. Did you get it? Yeah, I think the crosstalk would be good. Hey, how are you? Let's go. We do. Far right corner.
Hello, hello. And if everyone can please start finding their seat, we're going to go ahead and get the program started in just a minute.
Good morning, everyone. While people are finishing getting some breakfast, I'll start welcoming everyone to today's event. Elected officials, keynote speaker, moderators, panelists, and honored guests, welcome. I'm Abby Maloney, the president and CEO of Capital Analytics. Welcome to the official launch conference of Invest Charlotte, where we provide an in-depth analysis of what makes the region tick, where are the opportunities, and what challenges lie ahead. Thank you for being here today in this beautiful venue. What a unique experience being here at the Blumenthal Performing Arts Center. This is an exciting time for the greater Charlotte region. The economy is thriving, and the 15-county, two-state region is among the country's fastest growing in terms of population. Just look at the numbers. In the first quarter of this year, a Charlotte Regional Business Alliance report showed the greatest jobs growth in the region in 3 years, with about 4,700 new jobs announced. The quarter also saw $2.2 billion in new capital investments. On the population front, census data shows about 84 people moved to the region every day in 2020 and 2021, a pace of growth that topped the national average. That means more talent available to meet the workforce demands of the companies that are growing, relocating, or expanding in Greater Charlotte. In almost every way, Charlotte has emerged from the pandemic stronger and ready to continue upward pre-COVID momentum that had already characterized the region. I'm sure our keynote speaker today, Tracy Dodson, can shed even more light in that direction. But growth needs to be planned for, and a key to maintaining that upward trajectory is the ability of companies and regional leaders to anticipate change and adapt as needed, as was evidenced quite plainly during the pandemic. Innovation will be also integral in a winning strategy, which will be a key focus in our first panel today, Innovation and Preparation. The key to staying ahead is anticipating change. Growth also requires a substantial investment in the region's infrastructure. Much of that is already underway, but much more needs to be done. Our second panel today, focused on real estate and construction, will directly address the needs and the challenges that lie ahead in this regard. Looking further out, a clear vision is required for the longer term to ensure that Greater Charlotte has the strongest foundations, not only for today's challenges, but for those in the future horizon, a topic that our third panel on striking a balance between long-term strategies and adaptability will delve into. A balanced strategy and will also be necessary in the shorter term as we face numerous challenges emerging from the pandemic. Top of the list, no doubt, is the rampant inflation that is very much in place amongst the country and reflected across all industries. Rising interest rates, whether the Federal Reserve can manufacture a soft landing for the economy, are key factors for everyone. Will we enter a recession, a prolonged slowdown, or will the economy surprise us and stumble briefly only to get back and race on? Much of it, as we have much done in the pandemic. Clearly, I've had too much coffee this morning, and I am stumbling almost every single word. Thank you all for being very patient with me. These uncertainties will impact the short term as the outcome becomes clear. But overall, however, when we look at the greater picture for the Charlotte region, what we see is a great deal of optimism. At this time of change, as we're now mostly accustomed to living with COVID, it's particularly important to look ahead, leaning on the lessons that we learned over the past 2 years. At Capital Analytics, like so many other businesses, we saw the pandemic as an opportunity to change things up. Business intelligence has never been more important before, whether it's print, digital, or conferences like these, and finally, conferences back in person. First, we expanded our talented team at Capital Analytics and have entered into 11 new markets in the post-pandemic climate: Pittsburgh, Nashville, Minneapolis-St. Paul, Raleigh-Durham, San Antonio, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, and North and Central Jersey, bringing our economic reporting library to just under 20 markets. Next, our Invest Insights video platform has exploded. We brought our network of high-level CEOs in front of the camera to share with our audience their views and advice from everything from creativity in light of the pandemic, cryptocurrency and NFTs' long-term effect on banking norms, the Great Resignation, and retaining and attracting talent, and so much more. We expanded that video platform to a podcast so that our readers and viewers can listen to us on the go. In all of our discussions with hundreds of businesses and political leaders over the past year, a common thread is how far we've gone in such a short amount of time, how advances that were expected to take years have only taken months. Today, Charlotte is among the leading examples of what it takes not only to grow stronger, but to grow better. We have quite a lineup for you today. However, before our discussions begin, I'd like to take a moment and thank today's sponsors. Our gold sponsors, Catapult Employers Association, Crescent Communities, Flagship Healthcare Properties. Our bronze sponsors, Bernard Robinson and Company, Catalyst Capital Partners, EDIFICE, Miles-McClellan Construction Company, Segra, and Walbridge. And our honored sponsors, the Blumenthal Performing Arts Center, City of Rock Hill, LaBelle Architecture, McGuire Woods, Perkins & Will, Pfeiffer University, Potker Construction, Troutman Pepper, Trillium Federal Credit Union, and Uptown Catering. Thank you. It is with your support that we can continue to bring high-level speakers and content to the greater Charlotte area. You might have noticed some table stands on your tables with some information on our social media channels. Please be sure to join the discussion by tagging us and adding the hashtag ICLT22Summit. Also, you can register for complimentary access to our entire Invest library today with the QR code on that same table stand. Also, the Invest Charlotte report that will be released officially today is already in our digital library. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote, Tracy Dodson, the Assistant City Manager and Economic Development Director for the City of Charlotte. Tracy, can you join me on stage?
Thank you, Abby. It's so great to see everybody here today. So great to be back in person having these events and to be a part of launching the third edition of Invest Charlotte. It's great to see familiar faces and faces that represent a variety of industries here. I'm very proud of our city and appreciate when we can come together to talk about driving more growth and prosperity here. Our community, like so many other communities in the country, has had a lot to deal with over the past several years, from dealing with COVID-19 to social unrest to political changes and realities. We're not immune to issues like inflation, labor issues, affordable housing. I'm like Abby, I'm tripping over on my coffee this morning. What makes Charlotte stand out? How have we been able to navigate these issues? The mayor recently shared a story with me where she was at the White House and another mayor leaned over and said, "Hey, I keep hearing about all these things you're doing in Charlotte. What's the secret sauce?" The secret sauce is not really a secret, and it's something that I tell people all the time. Charlotte's success is long built on partnerships. It's about real relationships developed between members of the public and the private sector. For years, leaders of private business and political leaders have worked together to help build our city. As we look forward to the future and Charlotte's continued growth, those partnerships and those relationships are vital to how we succeed. We have seen Charlotte do things differently. We approach business recruitment. It's a great example. Fran, I'm looking at you. You were part of this. It's a great representation and how we've seen tremendous success. We've helped recruit over 18,000 jobs in recent years. We continue to remain committed to attracting and growing jobs and investment in Charlotte through tailored client service and strategic partnerships. And we don't take these investments lightly. We want a business here so that they can maximize value and opportunity. We also think differently and strategically about how they can get involved with our community and how we grow together. We want the company to know our values, and we want them to understand us and what drives us. Another example of how we're built on partnerships is how, after COVID shut down our nation, our city, our county, and many of our business leaders came together to establish a multi-million-dollar fund to support small businesses. In addition, we came up with a plan in the community and partnered with the Foundation of the Carolinas to distribute $30 million to 2,500 small businesses across our community. This is why I believe we have such a resilient community and how we've shown our strength over the past several years. Continuing to build on that streak, we have recognized that there's certain areas of our communities that need unique strategies in order to help them create the real change that they desire. From this, we've taken a more holistic approach in supporting equitable investment in 6 identified corridors, of which we call the corridors of opportunity. And it has expanded into a community-wide public-private partnership. It has truly been amazing to watch organizations lean in and want to have positive change in our community, help develop programs and systems that enable economic mobility. This is an example of this. Part of an example of this is the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative that will invest $250 million to address inequities and barriers and opportunity through 4 priority focus areas. First and foremost, transforming JCSU into a top-tier career-focused HBCU. Next, we have bridging the digital divide and establishing a career center called the Center for Digital Equity. I mentioned the corridors of opportunity. There's also the part of the investment will go into these corridors. And then lastly, the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative will focus on ensuring that organizations commit to racial equity through advancing more Black leaders and leaders of color within their individual corporations. What's especially meaningful is that today's public-private partnerships are diverse, both people leading the work, but also the number of organizations and industries that are represented. I'm very proud that many of these organizations compete fiercely in the boardroom, but come together to move our community forward. As you can see, there's a lot of community work that goes into keeping Charlotte special. But there's also a fair amount of other public-private partnerships that are transforming the city. This is what I call the fun stuff. Whether it's to bring an MLS team here, I don't know who was at the game last night, but the game was great. It was a lot of fun. Or working with the Hornets on arena renovations that ensures the Hornets will be here until 2045. Also, the Pearl Atrium's Innovation District, which ignites many new industry growth possibilities. We strive to create great places for our residents and new opportunities, and businesses to have the opportunity to grow. We acknowledge the economy may be slowing down, but that's no reason for us to slow down. Our work takes years and even decades, and it pains me coming from the real estate industry to say that in the public sector, but it can take a long time. I recently had a conversation with a developer, and we were talking about the redevelopment of our bus facility downtown. And he said, "Why would you ever be talking about building new office right now?" And I said, "You know, this project can't deliver," again, it pains me to say this, until 2028. I think we'll be okay by then. So as you can tell, it takes time, but the transformation is fun. No matter how large or small the project, the company, or the partnership, it's all about customer service and taking pride in our community. We have to stay ahead of our tough issues: homelessness, upward mobility, transportation, and housing. While we learn from other cities, we need to continue to be unique. We need to continue to do things the Charlotte way. I get frustrated when people say, well, what's happening here? What's happening there? And I say, we can learn from these cities, but let's be our own unique Charlotte. That's why I'm so energized about new companies investing in Charlotte, new jobs and new growth. It's more organizations to learn how we are, what our culture is, and our Charlotte way of doing things. It's never been more exciting to be a part of transforming this great city. And it's truly the partnerships that continue to pave the way for Charlotte's future. And speaking of partners, I know we have a lot of great panelists, so I will get out of the way at this point. And thank you for having me.
We want to present you with the first copy of the report. Can you join the center stage? We have the first copy of the report for Tracy. Let's give Tracy another round of applause.
Take this out of your record.
And now it's my pleasure to welcome the first panel, Ingenuity and Preparation. The key to staying ahead is anticipating change to the stage. Can all the panelists and moderators come to the stage? Max Crampton Thomas, our regional editor, will be moderating the panel. All those mics should already be on.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to be with you all today and to moderate this panel of world-class leaders. In the course of the last few years, we have seen just how important it is to try and anticipate change, whether that be for individuals, organizations, governments, and more. For the various industries represented on this stage today, that can mean a multitude of things. In healthcare, it could be anticipating potential sweeping changes in regulation from the federal government. For education, anticipating changes in the type of skills needed for the jobs of the future as we become a more digital economy remains top of mind. To discuss how they are using staying ahead by anticipating change, I am joined by an incredibly talented panel. Bart Walker, the co-chair of the Healthcare and Life Sciences Industry team for McGuire Woods, Brandon Edge, the president and CEO for Flagship Healthcare Properties, and Scott Bullard, the president of Pfeiffer University. Let's go ahead and jump right into the conversation. So I'm going to start with a question for everybody. As you look at the last couple of years, what do you feel has influenced the manner in which you currently conduct your daily businesses, and what are the biggest differences? We'll go ahead and we'll start, I guess, left or right to left.
You're up. Ooh, I'm up, great. Obviously, I think the way we do business now is vastly different for every business with the remote work environment. That was the biggest change for us when mid-March 2020, this new COVID-19 thing came out, and everybody went home. And we thought, well, we'll take a couple of extra notebooks, and we'll be back in the office in a week or so. And 2 years plus later, the world is still a different place, and in some ways, we'll never go back to how we were operating before with the hybrid remote type environment. So. Being prepared for that is not something that I think anybody, or at least most of us, were really thinking about. But being able to react and think and listen to your customers is something that's come to the forefront for us and our company of how to try to predict the future. It's not predicting the future; it's asking questions and it's listening to your customers and your employees to help you prepare.
Absolutely. And then we'll go with Bart.
Sure. Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, great. Thanks for having me, by the way. This is, looking forward to it. This is fun. Good to get in front of people again. So as a law firm, we've got 16 offices nationwide, and fortunately, we were already kind of prepared in the sense that we had IT infrastructure in place. We already operated on a one firm model where we're all knitted together by fiber optic cables across the country and across the world. So, but as lawyers, we also kind of expected the worst, and we're very pessimistic going in, and sky is falling. What do we need to do to prepare? And there's a lot of scrambling around, and then very quickly we realized that this was going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And I think some of the things we took away from it were not necessarily unique. I'm sure a lot of you have done the same things, really just focusing on fundamentals, shoring up, your business operations, revenue cycle, looking at your people more than anything else. If you're not there every day anymore, you have to make sure you're investing in relationships, investing in development, and bringing people along with you. You can't anymore take for granted that people are just going to show up. You've got to have this trust, and it's part of your culture really, is if you've got this kind of certain level of trust that people are going to do what they need to do to serve the clients, then the rest kind of sorts itself out. So I think the big takeaway for us was really just return to fundamentals, get down to business basics, and then from there, use that as a jumping off point for other things that we'll talk about in a little bit in terms of innovation and how we change how we provide service to our clients.
Definitely. And then President Bullitt?
Thank you. I think it was an interesting time, to quote a minister friend of mine, it was certainly a time in which we were more isolated than ever as individuals, but also more engaged than ever as individuals. This hastened the process for example, Charlotte's oldest MBA program at Pfeiffer, been here since the 70s and 80s, to deliver classes in an exclusively online format. And thankfully, since our MBA professors, wave your hands, Dr. Susan Luck and Dr. Rashawn Gross, had been delivering MBA courses online, they could go to the outer region of our 15 county region, to our traditional campus in Stanley County, and help our undergraduate professors quickly pivot and learn how to teach traditional undergraduate courses online. So everything from engaging students, which is at the core of our mission, to having our athletic conference meetings more often, precisely because video conferencing technology helped us do that. So in some ways, it just made us more engaged than ever. And it's been a very interesting time in evolution.
Absolutely. As we transition away from really looking back, I want to move ourselves over to the current landscape. And before I get into my more pointed questions, which I promise are quite loaded, I want to start off talking a little bit about identifying some of the challenges. So with all the growth happening in Charlotte, what do you believe are the main challenges and primary risks currently facing that future growth and progression of both the healthcare and the education industries at this time? And we'll go ahead. This time we'll start at the end. So President Bullitt, if you'd like to pick that up.
Well, we all know millennials have more information at their fingertips than they've ever had before. And the question colleges and universities all across this country are encountering is millennials want to know why they should pay for information that has been free to them for their entire lives. And so colleges have been focusing on this distinction between knowledge on the one hand, and wisdom, which at Pfeiffer we still think matters. We know that young people and young professionals will encounter knowledge every day, every second, with these devices that never leave their hands. But we still believe that seasoned professionals with the terminal degree in their field will help them understand that knowledge and ask hard questions like, just because we can do something, does it mean we ought to do something? So we still think that matters. I slide this in every chance I get when high school seniors come to our campus. The average college graduate still makes over $1 million more over the course of their lifetime than does the non-college graduate. And we'll see how that stat evolves, but it's very important for me that our young people and the young people in this region, whether they go to Pfeiffer or another accredited university, know that they need mentors and know that they can grow in ways that not only increase the bottom line in their paycheck, but back to the vision of our founders. Our founder, Emily Pruden, came to this region in 1885, trying to produce school teachers and Methodist ministers, right? And her motto was, I want to create people who will lead lives of useful service. So I don't know if Emily would recognize an MBA program or our new PA school, but I think she would be proud that today, the value proposition that we're putting forward to our potential clients is that they can make an impact in this region and create in young people a desire to lead lives of useful service, even if the disciplines and the professions look differently. And I'll say more about that when we enter into the healthcare discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bart?
Yeah, no shortage of challenges. I think if you look ahead 1 year or 2 years, the next year or two looks a lot different than the past 1 or 2 years. And I think the next 10 years looks a lot different than the last 10 years as well. Charlotte definitely has some built-in advantages in terms of just geography, natural resources. I think the location is a sweet spot. There are a lot of things going for us as a region. I think some of the key challenges and risks are taking it from a traditional financial powerhouse city and then growing that in the same way, extending that into things like healthcare, to education, and really making it a destination. I think that's the next leap. And how do you transform the city from what it is today into that? Part of that's diversification. I think that's important. I think being too heavily reliant on financial services is tricky. It's risk and reward. We've all been the beneficiaries of being, a huge financial center, and I don't think we should downplay that. I think that's a huge advantage. The challenge is how do you then extend that into other industries, and I think that's the key. There are a host of other challenges beneath the surface for that. I think one is infrastructure, just keeping up. I think as we can all recognize. But not just physical infrastructure, it's technology, it's IT, it's becoming a leader in things that are not necessarily geographically bound. I think most industries are moving away from physical location as a proxy for greatness or as a necessary precondition for being successful in a particular area. I do think healthcare will always remain a little bit unique in that respect because the patient is there. You'll never be able to avoid that, right? But at the same time, we're seeing growth in things like telemedicine, tech-enabled delivery of healthcare, preventative medicine, population health management. And then in the life sciences, you're seeing all kinds of distribution away from traditional geographies for the same reasons. So plenty to talk about, much more than a 45-minute panel, but that's kind of my high-level thoughts.
I appreciate that. Brandon?
I couldn't address the challenges any better than Tracy did, our keynote. Charlotte's got plenty of challenges. We've got access to affordable and quality education and healthcare. We've got social unrest. We've got racial inequality. We've got affordable housing. A ton of challenges. The exciting thing and the comforting thing about where we find ourselves is that Charlotte has a greater history of solving those problems. I saw a stat earlier this week, and I don't know if it's true or not, that somewhere between 100 and 120 people continue to move to Charlotte every day. And I'm a big believer that population growth cures a lot of ills. Now, certainly it causes a lot of headaches, and people complain about traffic, and it causes affordable housing issues. But the influx of people shows how dynamic our community is, and the opportunities that both young people and seniors alike see in Charlotte. So I think hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about the medical university and having a medical school here and what that impact is going to be. It is, I think, as much press has been written about having a school of medicine here. The impact, I think, is going to be far greater than what we've recognized and discussed so far, both in terms of access to healthcare, quality of healthcare, and also quality of education.
Well said. Okay, as promised, I have some loaded questions. Bart, we're going to start with you. As the co-chair of the Healthcare and Life Sciences industry team, you offer a unique perspective on pending regulation and government enforcement that could affect the future or other certain industries, excuse me. In the case of healthcare and life sciences, what regulatory or governmental changes have the potential to shape and change the future of these sectors for the long term? And how should businesses in these spaces best prepare for these potential changes?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. And just a little bit of background on me. I'm the co-chair of our firm's Healthcare and Life Sciences industry team, which spans across all the practice groups. I personally am a corporate M&A lawyer, so I do a lot of healthcare deals. But a couple of things I want to talk about, which I think are really the interesting pieces, not that what I do is not interesting, but the big thing that we spend a lot of our time talking to clients about and quite frankly warning people about is fraud and abuse in healthcare and regulatory enforcement. And the government, the way that they view it, if you talk to a government regulator, and I've talked to a number of them, politically, the more dollars you put into healthcare enforcement, the more recoveries you get. It's not quite a one-to-one correspondence, but I think the legislators are very tempted to say, well, this is a tool for closing budget gaps. If we spend more money on enforcement, we're going to catch more bad guys. In reality, what's happened is the fraud and abuse enforcement has gotten to the point where they're capturing not just really bad people, it's kind of gray area practices and even well-intentioned foot faults and technical violations of law that are being captured. And if you get a government subpoena or civil investigative demand, you could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars responding to it and have done nothing wrong. And what we tell our clients a lot of time is, it's not whether you're guilty or not, or it's not whether you can do this under the law or not, it's whether you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars finding out. You don't want to have to go to a court and spend years of your time defending yourself. So, generally that augurs towards a more conservative approach to regulatory compliance. But the key takeaway is it's creeping away, not just from catching bad guys and true fraudsters, but to every organization now, especially large ones like hospitals. They're a very easy mark for regulators and for whistleblowers. The way the healthcare regulatory laws work is we're all deputized potential whistleblowers. If you see something that's a violation of law, you can file suit on behalf of the US government and you would get part of that settlement or part of that conviction or penalty, whatever it ends up being. So that's been a huge trend that we spend a ton of time looking at, and something that all healthcare providers for sure need to pay attention to, and the rest of us should at least be aware of. And then I'll just quickly mention one other thing, which is antitrust enforcement. As healthcare providers, like all businesses, are getting bigger, it seems, there's greater government scrutiny on that size. And at what point does that size become anti-competitive is really a big area for disagreement. And depending on which bureaucrat or which politician you talk to, the line between healthy scale and profitable scale versus anti-competitive, that line is very unclear sometimes. And so as businesses are continuing to scale, that's something that we all, I think, need to be mindful of and aware of. It's a trend that's not going away. And we've seen a ton of private equity dollars funneling into healthcare because it's a great area for investment. It's an area that's ripe for consolidation. It's ripe for innovation. And professional business management, quite frankly, but at the same time, you have to be very careful about kind of the antitrust implications and the broader implications of that scale.
Absolutely. President Bullard or Brennan, do either of you have any thoughts? No? Perfect. I can move on to my next question then. Brennan, we talk about this transformation in healthcare, so I think this next question is quite apt. Over the last few years, we've witnessed a transformation occurring in how healthcare is delivered, especially as the delivery of care model continues to change, leaning more on proactive healthcare and wider access. Given this transformation, how do you anticipate the demand for development of new healthcare facilities to change? And do these changes lend themselves to more of a hub and spoke model of healthcare?
You're exactly right that healthcare has been changing how it's delivered well before COVID arrived. And a little bit of background about Flagship Healthcare. We work in the real estate side of healthcare. We're not clinicians. We're real estate owners. We're real estate managers. We buy and build and lease and manage and develop and own medical office buildings and ambulatory surgery centers. So places where patients go and get their care and then leave without an overnight stay. And that outpatient model has really taken off over the last 30 or 40 years. It's not unique to the United States, but it is different than in many other parts of the world. That's not slowing down. So of the 60 plus million surgeries that were done last year, over 60% of them are now done outside of a hospital campus. That's not going to change. And healthcare and healthcare systems are one of the few businesses, when you think about it, that don't want you to come visit them, right? I mean, it's the hospitals don't want you there. I mean, what other business exists where they don't want you to come to their place of business? I would have said banks, they don't want you in the branches, but now there's a branch on every single corner going up. I don't know what they're doing there, but apparently it's something. Outpatient delivery is not slowing down. It's I like to refer to the 3 C's of healthcare that have taken come into focus in particularly in the last few years, which customers care about cost, right? So it's cheaper to deliver care outside of an expensive hospital campus. It's more about convenience. So when you need to go get care, do you want to drive downtown or uptown, park in the 7th level of the parking deck and wind your way through a maze of corridors to go get care? Or do you want to go to your neighborhood center and surface park, go do an errand and then go in and get care? So, and then the level of care, so cost, convenience, and care, the quality of care when you're receiving care in a hospital setting versus outside of a hospital setting. You might think you'd get better care under the watchful eye of so many people. In fact, it's the opposite. So you get better outcomes in that outpatient setting where you're not likely to get infected with something else. So yes, the short answer is that model is not going to slow down. They're not building 1,000-bed Carolinas Medical Center hospitals. It's almost impossible to do that now. So you're going to see what's being done in Union County with smaller hospitals that are serving kind of a more generalized population. No, will you go get your heart transplant there or your brain surgery? Probably not. But for 90% of the things that you need, it's going to be more spread out and localized as opposed to coming to a main hospital campus. And that delivers better outcomes at a better price.
Absolutely. And I just got the 10-minute warning, so I'm going to jump right into you, President Bullard. There is a gap currently between the current supply of available jobs on the market that require a college degree and the number of people available to fill these jobs. Healthcare has been one of those industries most heavily affected by the lack of available labor. So as nursing and healthcare are some of the largest majors at Pfeiffer, how is your university working to tackle this challenge, and what needs to change within the traditional higher education model to further address this issue?
Yeah, well, I'm very grateful for a vibrant faculty and a very active board of trustees. I always say to other aspiring higher ed leaders that a seat on a board of trustees is an honor, but it's not an honorary position. You need to have a working board. About 5 years ago, Pfeiffer was losing $4 or $5 million per year. Several years in a row, and began very helpfully to ask the region, what can we do to help? 37 miles from where we're sitting right now, you can cross a county line, and when you enter that county, the life expectancy is lower by 2 years. The infant mortality rate jumps. The percentage of people who are still smoking tobacco jumps. Right. The mortality rate for men diagnosed with prostate cancer jumps because there's a stigma about getting screened. And so thankfully, Pfeiffer asked these questions and learned via a partnership, the local bank president joining the board of trustees and the bank funding a study generated at Duke University that helped us understand there's a nursing shortage. We need 37% more nurses by 2026. We need physician assistants in our county because our county and adjacent counties don't have many MDs, and physician assistants can now see patients and prescribe medication without an MD present. And at the age of 25, coming out of a PA school, they can make $138,000 a year. So we saw these as phenomenal opportunities. We added a third program, Occupational Therapy, which is next to nursing, and this is a lesser known statistic. Next to nursing, it represents the second greatest shortage in American healthcare by the year 2030, and has perhaps the greatest effect on readmission rates to hospitals, right? We talk about recidivism in criminal justice. Hospitals don't want you back, and occupational therapists strengthen stroke victims and others. So we saw these gaps, and we laid out a plan to our community. And true to Tracy's point earlier, we've had the 3 most successful fundraising years in Pfeiffer's 137-year history, 3 years in a row. We were transparent about our weaknesses, but most prospective donors that we went to said, you have a plan. And today, 45 minutes from here, sits an $18 million campus wherein we deliver nursing and physician assistant studies and occupational therapy studies that not only is improving long-term prospects for healthcare outcomes, but that building alone cleared about $2.7 million last fiscal year. So it's had an amazing effect on our ability to do some of the things in music and teacher education on our traditional campus that we've been trying to do for 5-10 years unsuccessfully. And we've got a teacher shortage to address in our county as well via that education major. So you see in the ways in which this is all symbiotic. It's been an amazing experience. And if I could say anything to fundraisers in the room, it would be transparent. Be transparent about your weaknesses and show potential funders that you've got a plan. And I believe you'll be rewarded, and the region subsequently will be rewarded.
And I think that transitions us beautifully into what will most likely be our last question, because we just have a couple of minutes left. But I want to get the whole panel's perspectives on this. So given the current landscape, how will collaboration within the healthcare and education ecosystems be even more essential moving forward? And I guess we'll go ahead and start with you, Brandon.
Well, as I mentioned at maybe the last question, I think one of the greatest weaknesses in terms of access to education and healthcare is also one of our greatest opportunities. We didn't talk about the medical school much on this panel, but I think it is a great opportunity for us to address things like healthcare professional shortages, with universities partnering with both higher ed and physician training, nurse training, physician assistant training to address some of those shortcomings and opportunities. I think it's going to do more than just address those two things with some of the economic impacts of the Pearl and that whole development and redevelopment of that area. Dr. Bullard said, have a plan. It's better to have a plan before a crisis hits. There's a reason why on those fire alarms it says, in case of emergency, break glass. When an emergency or crisis hits, 90% of the people just lose their mind and go, what do I do? So that's why they print that stuff on there. Oh gosh, it's a fire. What do? I break the glass. So plan, create a plan before you need it. And I think, with the business community and our city and county government developing some of those plans now, we're going to be a lot better spot than if we're just trying to react.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah. So I think collaboration is going to become even more important, and it's going to have to be a little bit more intentional than it has been in the past. Kind of going back to what I said earlier, people aren't as chained to their desks anymore. They're not as accustomed to coming into an office every single day, whether you're in healthcare or education or any other field. And so I think the premium on collaboration is even more important in a few different ways. One is sort of decentralization. So being more intentional about the ways in which you collaborate within your particular field. And then also collaboration outside of that. I think we've touched on it a few different ways, how education and healthcare really are related. You really need a skilled labor force, and without that, you really can't deliver the care that you need and deliver innovation on the healthcare side, and vice versa. Without a really world-class healthcare system or healthcare environment, you lose opportunities in life sciences and research and so forth. So I think collaboration is very important. It's always been very important. I think it's going to be even more important going forward. particularly because people really aren't kind of shoulder to shoulder every single day.
Definitely. And then President Bullard.
I think it's really important to be open to the wisdom embedded in traditions other than your own, disciplines other than your own. You have a former religion major and religion professor sitting up here talking to you about healthcare. What do I know about healthcare? I have a board member, Natasha Suber, in the back of the room, who's vice president of communications for SCORE. The local bank president who majored in religion at App State and got an MBA in finance from UNC Charlotte. The CEO of Charlotte Pipe, who was amazed at a Pfeiffer graduate's performance in his accounting division, comes to me and gives one of the lead gifts on the construction of our new healthcare campus. I just think that collaborating with others is so crucial, and the outworking and the things that result from these kinds of things. We've signed 3 articulation agreements with community colleges this semester. The local bank takes notice, hears about the ensuing oncoming teacher shortage in our region, and starts asking questions like, well, what would it mean for a first-generation college student to go to Rowan Cabarrus Community College or Stanley Community College, go to Pfeiffer and major in education, and be on a full scholarship sponsored by one of the local banks and not have to pay a dime as long as they promise to serve as a school teacher in our region for 5 years. And so partnerships and collaboration, I think, are crucial for reducing the cost of education for young people and giving them access. And not only giving them a way out of the cycle of poverty embedded in some of their family systems, but again, enriching them, helping them to see the impact they're making on young lives 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And we can extend this analogy to nursing, similarly. So I know we're out of time, but thanks for having me on the panel.
No, of course. And I want to thank all of you for being a part of this panel. I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap up. But again, I appreciate your participation today, and I hope everyone gained something from this conversation. Thank you. We're just going to take a quick picture.
Thank you.
This will be the last you have to hear from me, I promise. Okay. I want to give another big thank you to our first panel. It's encouraging to hear all that your organizations are doing to anticipate change and stay prepared for a somewhat uncertain future. I want to give a reminder to register today to read the Invest Charlotte report completely complimentary by using those QR codes on your table. You not only get the report, but you also get free access to our entire library. Also, please join our discussion on social media today by following our handles and also using that handy table stand using the hashtag ICLT22Summit. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next panel for today's event, Real Estate and Construction. How are infrastructure priorities aligned with development needs and what challenges lie ahead? Moderating this panel will be Walter Fisher, Charlotte Office Managing Partner of Troutman Pepper. If Walter and the rest of the panel could please join us up here on stage. And we'll give him a quick applause.
I also want to extend a welcome to each of you for being here. It is great to be in person again. I'm glad to and honored to have this opportunity to moderate this panel. As we've already heard, Charlotte's growth is a tremendous success story, but it also brings with it a number of challenges, including the need for sustainable and wise infrastructure. That's the topic that our panel will be looking into and discussing this morning. I want to introduce our panelists. To my immediate left is Tim O'Brien, Studio Manager, Labella Architecture. And then to his left is Keith Petker, Chairman and CEO of Petker Construction. And at the end is Brendan Pierce, President of the Commercial Business Unit at Crescent Communities. We're going to first focus on the context that exists today as it was created and influenced by some past events. This first question is for everyone, and we'll start with you, Tim, and move to the other end. What kinds of projects or business activities are currently keeping your organization busy during this point in the economic cycle? And how does this reflect or highlight Charlotte's strengths and opportunities?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's easier to find what projects are not overheated right now. And, I'll take that moment to state the obvious, which has a lot to do with population growth. And with that population growth, that dovetails into discussions about infrastructure. We at Labella, I'll keep the commercial short here, everyone, are working at it from both ends. That we've got folks who are working on the infrastructure which supports the housing of people. And again, I forget who had given the statistic on how many people a day move into this area. And I think again, primarily I equate Charlotte with opportunity. I think that's a word, and that occurs on a number of different levels, because we're looking at projects in opportunity zones to help level out some of the inequity that we have. The good news is we have building inventory, we have land inventory, so we're sort of we've become a big kid city, if you will, with all of the good and bad that goes with that, but we have resources to offset that, and that's exciting. What we're really doing is looking for, in different parts of town, looking for catalyst projects that start something in a direction that give that opportunity. Quite literally for the kind of smart growth that we hope to achieve.
Good morning, and thank you all for your time today. I couldn't have said it more. Opportunity is, if you're in a development and construction and real estate business, there's tremendous opportunity. For us, in the Southeast, lots of opportunity in multifamily, and then also in the warehouse distribution space. With all of the online shopping, Charlotte's really presenting itself as a strategic logistics hub for the region. And so between the rail systems, the ports, it's just really, really strategically located. And we see that as a tremendous growth opportunity, probably for the next couple decades. So I'll turn it over to Brent.
Thank you. About that. No, perfect. Sorry about that. So I oversee our commercial business at Crescent, and that is 4 lines of business. That's office, industrial, life science, and then the small project we have on the west side of town called the River District, which is a 1,400-acre city within a city, and probably a generational 10-year project. And then we have a very, very large multifamily group, and we have 9 offices across the United States and 16 markets we're in. So my point of all this is we have a pretty big sample size of what we do, $6 billion plus of real estate in the portfolio. And Charlotte is one of our best markets. We love it. And for all the things that we've been talking about earlier, a lot of things that Tracy brought up, the demand drivers are obviously different on my side for the different asset classes that we use. Industrial, as Keith was talking about, is tremendous. I mean, it's single-digit vacancy here in Charlotte and the Carolinas in general. Life science, we have a large 1 million square foot campus up in the Triangle, and that's, like I said, different dynamics than industrial. And we're still a huge believer of office as well, even though there's been a change. Everybody going to hybrid work, but hybrid to me seems like it's Tuesday through Thursday, so everybody still needs the same amount of office space. So nobody wants to work on Friday. I got it. Nobody wanted to work on Friday before COVID. And we can get into some of those, but we think Charlotte is one of our best markets, and we are all over the United States, and we're very fortunate to be headquartered here.
Thank you. This question also is for everyone to respond to, and Brendan, we'll start on your end and move this way. How would you characterize Charlotte's approach to growth over the last few years, and what do you currently perceive to be the most pressing challenges to growth?
So shout out to my friend Tracy and her team, who have done a phenomenal job. Not very often do Fortune 100 companies move their headquarters to a city like Honeywell. And so once that happens, people take notice, right? And we've got an unbelievable quality of life and an incredible place to live. Cliche, since this is the panel, to say infrastructure is critically important as we grow, but it really is. The biggest driver of the most important piece of infrastructure was the place I was at last night, with Charlotte Douglas Airport. It's been the biggest driver for our economy for the past 20 years. And while it's a pain to get through right now, and they're going to eventually be done one of these days, and I guess it's going to be like the fence at a farm. When you finish painting it, you got to start painting it again. But it's so important, the fact that we can get direct anywhere in the United States through Charlotte, which is just a huge competitive advantage to us, to our some of our cities that we're competing against. And so there's many other factors why Charlotte's been so successful, but that's one of the key ones I wanted to highlight. And but can't speak highly enough about our business-friendly environment and the fact that we want companies to come here instead of trying to push them out.
So we moved here, opened up our Southeast Regional Office in April 2019, and the reason why we did it is, at the time, the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance was the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, and just an open arms approach. And I had to do a little bit of a timeout about halfway through the day, and I said, hey, I'm not moving my headquarters here. This is just going to be a small office, maybe a half dozen people. And they said, we've already done our research. We want you here in Charlotte. And so that's the approach that the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance has taken to business recruitment, partnering with the mayor's office. And in addition to what Brendan had said with regard to the airport is a huge, significant plus. And you're going to see a tremendous amount of international recruitment and probably landing in the Charlotte region within the next 5 years because of that airport. So anyways, just a shout out, really appreciate it. And we're really enjoying it.
Hey, what was the question again? This is, I'm going to lighten it up a little bit because it feels like it's the world's largest Zoom call. And it is, I'm looking out here, I'm like, oh my. And I mean, on stage, I'm like, wanted to talk about Bruno and everything else like that. I got a 6-year-old. So this town is fascinating to me. I attended Clemson. Anyone? Bueller? And Charlotte, I swear, it felt at one point like it was a good place to stop, drop off a friend, maybe get gas and go to the ATM. My wife reminded me that when I said it feels like we'd only been here for a couple of years, that was 2000. Prior to that was I came and visited with my college roommate during the implosion of a building, and now I'm working to save aged structures. So boy, things do come full circle. I had to wonder then, when looking at Charlotte as initially a non-resident, as many of us are, but now a resident, and over the years, that whether or not, in fact, the town just poured fertilizer all over itself. Because I think we're in fact, a unique story within the context of the United States, maybe even the world. This city is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it is the will of the folks in this room that make this stuff happen. And I think perhaps it was Tracy earlier, or one of the earlier panelists, all wonderful folks, that, how do I say this? It is where there is a will, there is a way here. These people just make things happen. You make things happen in this town. I think we have to be able to sustain this. You know, we have our challenges. There's traffic. There's all this good stuff that everybody will cover more adequately than I. But I think, you know, what was said earlier was, let's be Charlotte. Let's be this unique thing. There was a whole ton of aspiration tied to this town that got us to this point, and this want and this need and this energy that you could see in everybody here. But let's now figure out how to be Charlotte, because I think that's what will sustain us. Something unique. Let it happen organically. Let's do these projects. Let's move these headquarters to this town. Let's use the resources that we have and leverage this amazing energy that is here at this point in time to make this a great town. So.
For the next question, we're going to focus on the unique impacts on the actual organizations of each of the three panelists of certain things related to infrastructure. As it pertains to your business, what are the most prominent challenges you currently are navigating, and what innovative methods are you using to most effectively mitigate those challenges? And we'll start with you, Tim.
I owe you a short answer now. We are hiring. Let me speak to a staffing crisis. If there is anyone here with even a baseline level understanding of architecture, how to draw a line, I would welcome you to take a business card from me. We promise a wonderful work environment filled with good humor, energy. We even have and this is a Labella thing. Let me get this out because hopefully it'll show up in the press in a bad way. Somebody will hashtag it. We have the best coffee maker in the world. So just a shout out to Labella's coffee people. So
we're hiring as well.
Oh man, there goes the contractor kind of taking the wind out of my sails again.
And not just construction management degree folks. We accept all kinds of folks nowadays. But anyways, we've got a lot of headwinds in construction, supply constraints, hyperinflation, trade labor shortages, and probably the biggest thing that we've been able to do is just communicate good, bad, or indifferent with people. And as quickly as what you can, and then try to get in front of stuff, you know, and that's what we've been trying to do is be as close to the manufacturing market to understand where the commodity indexes are going, and just be able to get in front of it and talk intelligently to people. People want information, and they're fine as long as you give it to them. So.
Yeah, so the inflation thing you see on TV is real, and we see it every single day. It's different. We have different challenges on our different product types. I mean, on industrial, I can't get a roof to put on top of a building, which apparently you need. It takes months and months to get electrical panels. I mean, all the stuff that you're dealing with on a daily basis. And then costs are going up. And so in some of our product types, we can pass those costs through. On our multifamily side, rents are going up, which if you're renting apartments, you're seeing that. On industrial, rents are going up. It's not as big a deal because the stuff that's in the box is way more expensive than the rent that the company pays on the box, and they just don't have the supply. So in some ways, we're able to pass those costs through, but we are cognizant that can't last forever, especially if there's a slowdown in the overall economy. And so we have the same thing on a labor side as well. We're very fortunate that we've had some success of hiring during the past couple of years because we've just had a lot going on. But it's still a challenge, right? As labor costs go up, as material costs go up, at some point that has to stop or demand dries up. And we think about that every day. When that demand dries up, how do we pivot?
Thank you. For the next question, I'm going to present it to each of the panelists again, but Keith, we'll start with you, move to Tim, and then to Brendan. The federal infrastructure bill is causing a great deal of conversation around what infrastructure priorities should be pursued. From your perspective, what are the region's greatest infrastructure priorities that should be addressed? And how do you anticipate the infrastructure bill to impact the region's economy?
I would say that it's a several-prong approach to looking at that. There's no single priority that takes precedence, but mass transit on a transportation side. Getting the Silver Line underway and really focusing on being able to bring people in economically into the city to work. That's significant. And then obviously the airport expansion is going to be significant on the infrastructure side. On the utility infrastructure side, wastewater treatment infrastructure. We really have to focus on that as a region, and then the electric grid, the power and distribution. And one thing that's going on right now on the state side is this NC Towers initiative. And if you guys need some sleeping material, go to nctowers.com and look it up. But it's an alternative energy delivery system that they're going to use along the coastline that could set North Carolina up for significant success in terms of bringing manufacturing and international business into the state. So anyways, lots going on that front.
Tim?
Oh, I was next. Oh, dear. Here again, the design guy with his shock and amazement over what has happened in Charlotte over the past couple decades. I seem to recall that at one point I had a desk somewhere in the South End, which is now probably the fire stair in a city that I don't even recognize anymore. And a lot of that happened as a function of some visionary folks saying, all right, we have this idea, one of these buildings, maybe one down the street or something like that, looking down from above and say, we're going to run a train from here to there. At the time, I will be the first to own up to how wrong I was, because I thought everybody was just crazy that this was going to be a catalyst for the level of development that it has been. But to echo your sentiments, 20 Ways to Sunday, the infrastructure drives that. And we are evidence of that power. And I think it has to be out, obviously it has to be out in front of it. These maps that are drawing from point A to point B, particularly as it relates to rail, I think it's a little bit more abstract in the air. Of course, the airport is an amazing thing emerging too, but particularly with respect to the rail lines, we in the architecture, design, development, and construction industries cannot thank those folks enough for drawing those lines. And our hope is that we continue, as a function of our success thus far, to see more resources dedicated to that. Because, as cynical as I am, given my profession, I'm now a believer that works. And we see where those lines are plotted out that are driving the locations and the tenants and occupancy of projects, because people want to be adjacent and they want to be that connected.
So the cool thing for me to say would be high-speed rail from Charlotte to Atlanta. Wouldn't it be great? Like you don't have to take 85 and you do all this work, and I'm going to be dead by the time that thing's built. So I'm not going. I was
cynical.
So, frankly, we need the unsexy stuff, right? We need water lines, we need sewer lines, we need stormwater lines. You see now, because of development that's happened, you drive around Charlotte after a heavy rain, there's a lot more standing water. That gets worse over time. We can't do more development projects because we don't have water lines that are sized appropriately, or they're falling apart because they're old. So fortunately, the city is focusing on that, and it needs to be built, but it needs to be built as quickly as possible. And the challenge with a federal program is you have procurement laws, and while they're put in place for the right reasons, they take a really long time to get them through. And so, we need more public-private partnerships. I talk about the River District. Crescent Communities is building West Boulevard in partnership with the city of Charlotte And we're able to, while we're going through still some of those same rules, we can do it privately, and we can coordinate it with everything else we're doing out there. And so there needs to be a smart way for this to be done in a public-private manner, or we can just say, no, we don't trust developers. We're going to do it publicly only, and it's just going to take a really long time, which is unfortunately what we don't need, and not just Charlotte, but a lot of these growing cities that we have, because they all have the same problems we do.
Max has given us the 10-minute warning, so I'm going to present a question to each of you. And the first question is for Brendan. Charlotte is currently in the midst of an unprecedented surge in demand for multifamily and residential housing in general, caused by the migration of folks to Charlotte that we've already spoken about and investment in the region. As prices continue to appreciate, how can the growth remain sustainable, and how has demand changed in regard to what people are seeking?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first about what demand changes that we've seen. We see two different types of renters. We see an urban renter and we see a suburban renter. And on the urban renters, you know, all the kids in South End who are having a great time, they care about services. They care about, can you get dry cleaning? Can you, how are my online boxes delivered to my space? Can I get a yoga class? Things of that nature. As well as the amenities. Everybody has to have the amenity game these days, on both urban and suburban, but especially in urban, you got to have the cool amenities. On suburban, what we found, especially as COVID happened and work from home, people were moving to those suburban, they wanted more space, right? They probably maybe have a family, they have more demands for space, especially if they're working from home. And so the units are bigger. We found the demand has been incredibly high, and we're focusing a lot of our projects on suburban apartments. And a lot of them had moved to the suburbs, say, okay, this is going to be our placeholder until we find a house we're going to buy. Well, I don't need to fill anybody in on what happened in the housing market the past 2 years. It's been very challenging to do that. So we do think that there will be some people that will move out apartments into houses, but it's going to take a while for the housing market to normalize. There's just still not enough product on the market. That should happen as interest rates continue to go up, but how fast that happens is going to be hard to say. The reality is, how do we keep rents from going up? I'm a big believer of the supply-demand curve. There is more supply than there's more demand than there is supply right now. And so we have to create more supply in the city. And the way to do that is through quicker permitting times, through just being, as much as people sometimes don't like development, there's a trade-off. If you don't like development, you don't want to build apartments, and there's no other places to live, prices go up. It's just Econ 101. So not an easy answer, and there's a lot of people trying to figure this out, not to mention the affordable housing aspect of it, which is certainly a challenge. And there's so many issues with that as it relates to capital and how it's built. But it's, you know, any growing city, like I said, just like infrastructure, it's an issue, and we're seeing it here in Charlotte. But we're here to help the demand side or the supply side of the equation. Anyway,
Keith, this one's for you. Considering the continuous growth happening in Charlotte, how are considerations around constructing new projects changing as a result of shifting demands and the need for smart development to accommodate growth?
Well, I would say that because there's been so much growth in the region, you know, land pricing has gone up significantly, and so optimizing that land, you know, and working with you know, the economic development group for that county or that town to try to streamline permitting processes, zoning approval processes, and then on top of that, you know, getting in front of the inflation and the supply chain constraints by moving some of that procurement activity up during that process of civil planning probably be a huge, huge benefit. So.
Tim, with all the recent technological and innovative improvements in the architecture industry, as well as the increased focus on community and environmental impact, what has changed about the way you and your team approach the design process when working on a project with sustainability as a principal or forefront consideration?
I'll once again digress into a story that I don't always find technology necessarily to immediately mean innovation or advancement. Again, I say that from the perspective of having a teenage daughter. She's 15, and and I'm the guy in the office who still uses tracing paper and likes to talk to people. That said, yes, of course, obviously our industry has been impacted immensely with technological innovation, but it's mostly in the form of tools. As far as the design process and technology, I would argue it hasn't necessarily changed that much since the pyramids. You have to find out what it is your clients and constituents and end users need, and you need to provide that. What has shifted certainly has been the tools, the ability to visualize things before they're here. It used to be all sort of an act of the mind that, and we're going to show you this abstract thing and we're going to envision what this is going to be like in the future. Now, in each of your offices, there's 20 renderings that have people walking by, a train that's not there yet, a high rise that's not there yet, and you see the setting sun reflecting off of the glass. Which is all fantastic, but as these things then dovetail into the idea of sustainability, it's not just an environmental thing. Yes, we can deal with nitrogen uptake in ponds for stormwater. We can deal with the things that we typically associate with sustainability from an environmental standpoint. But I think two other pieces of that puzzle. One is economic, right? An element of resiliency to this community, to this economy over time. What happens in the South End 10 years out when maybe the rental market has shifted and we have this level of inventory? There are things that we have to consider long term, our economic resilience. And also I think, I'll end on this because it's near and dear to my heart, is sort of the cultural component of it, that I think in order for Charlotte to sustain itself, we need to grow in an organic way, like create opportunities for Charlotte's culture to for those seeds to grow. We've been really good at sort of making way for bigger expressions or things that serve a need right now. But I think we're afforded the opportunity to kind of pivot now and look at things that are more legacy building for this city as we've established ourselves.
Thank you. We've got 3 minutes, so we're going to need to keep our responses to this last question brief. But I would ask each of you, and starting with Brendan and moving in my direction, how do you feel we're building a more resilient and sustainable future for the Charlotte region?
So look, I'm a big economics guy, right? So if jobs solve a lot of problems, right? If we have jobs of varying skill sets and levels across our city, that provides for a vibrant economy, and therefore there's so many statistics as people are working, they're just healthier and they're happier, right? And so that's the first and foremost. And then but we need to be thoughtful, right? We just don't want to grow haphazard. The cities that have done that in the past, they're just not interesting places. And so Charlotte, we need to focus on how do we continue and be even more of an interesting place. But I'm going to keep this brief by saying I travel all over the United States. We live in the best city in the United States, full stop. And if you're doubting it, you shouldn't, because this is an incredible place to be. We're all extremely fortunate to be here. And I think and the great part about Charlotte is, as someone said earlier, we all pitch in, we all do things, and it's a cool place. And it's going to be even better 20 years from now. And I'm just excited to be in this industry and excited, to be able to share that with all of you.
probably echo Brennan. Economic growth solves a lot of problems. It increases tax revenue for the municipalities, and so far the Charlotte region has taken that increased tax revenue. They've invested in supporting the accelerated growth, and we just got to kind of continue to do that, and so that we don't get behind the 8 ball with some of this infrastructure and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fun, it's exciting. There's so much stuff going on. I'm a construction guy, so walking around and seeing all these tower cranes is pretty exciting to me. But yeah, so I know it causes confusion on the roadways, but I might stop and holy cow, that's pretty cool. Anyways.
Hey, short answer. Not you. I didn't mean it towards you. I'm going to make a short answer. I had all these notes and I said nothing that was on them. We've done a great job making it work for the creative class, and where we've put our attention to certain groups. The theme that I think we're hearing now is we have to go deeper and make it work for everybody. I think there are a lot of when I see more seniors in Uptown walking around comfortably, when we see I think depth to what it is we're trying to do. So
thank you to the audience for your attention during this segment of the program, and thank you to each of our panelists for your thoughtful responses.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great, let's give panel 2 another round of applause. And so without further ado, let's get on to the third panel today, our last panel. I would like to welcome all the panelists and our moderator for Best Laid Plans, Striking the Balance Between Long-Term Strategies and Adaptability to the Stage. Our moderator is Judy Wishneck, the Vice President and Charlotte Commercial Market Executive of Trulient Federal Credit Union. Judy, thank you. Oh. There we go. Excellent. I'll let you introduce your panelists.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Okay, thank you. So good morning. I am so excited to be here with my fabulous friends. So full disclosure, I've known these two ladies for a very long time, and I've had the pleasure to witness how they have led their teams and organizations through all the challenges and changes we've experienced over the last couple of years. So I'm excited to hear about their words of wisdom that they're going to be sharing with us. But this morning, so Cheryl Richards is the CEO for Catapult, and Irene Vogelsong is the Associate Principal and Practice Leader for Perkins & Will. Unfortunately, Jennifer was not able to join us this morning. So with that, let's get started. So ladies, how have the events of the last few years forced your organizations to rethink its approach to long-term strategy?
Shall I start? You can start us off. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I think we've heard from the other panelists that life has changed over the past couple of years, and we all have experienced that. It has changed the dynamics for organizations and how we attract talent to our workplaces. It has changed how we think about retaining talent in our workplaces, and it's changed the way that we personally show up at our offices or in our homes on Zoom. At Catapult, over the last couple of years, we transformed as two legacy organizations, each with a 25+ year history. In the midst of COVID, became one organization that was serving the state of North Carolina and South Carolina, helping to prepare businesses for the challenges that face them ahead. So what we do every day is help businesses figure out how to accelerate exceptional workplaces by bringing engaged people into the offices. So we ourselves had to transform and think about how we do business so that we could be on the front edge, leading best practices, so that when any one of our 2,400 members calls us on the phone and says, what do I do in this situation? We can give lived experiences about transforming the business and also share best practices from our other members in the organization. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think we've been living the transformation along with all of you over the past couple of years.
Well, that is very relevant to what I'm about to speak about, because with Perkins and Will, we have actually been focused on resiliency planning and design for over a decade. So the events of the last 2 years gave us the largest pilot that we could have ever hoped for, which has now turned into a case study. So thankfully, we had the technology and the tools in place to be able to seamlessly work remotely. We were able to then take these tools, take what we were learning, continue to do our research and invest further in resiliency so that we could bring these lessons learned to our clients. As I mentioned, but this has become a case study now. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it has led us to really continue to be more reflective rather than reactive during these times. I think being reflective has also impacted the way that we view the quest for talent and the alignment between our projects that we will pursue with our principals as well. We have to be more selective at times when there is a talent war out there when it comes to aligning ourselves with our values. One great advantage that has also come out of the way that we've used our tools and the way that we've adapted during these last 2 years is that we have been able to become more collaborative and engaging, not only with our team members across the state, but with our team members across the country. And what that has done, it has opened up a whole bench width of resources and possibilities that we may not have considered before, because we were very tied to the way that we were working, which was about being in person. So I think we've opened up a lot of opportunities that we're continuing to explore.
Fantastic. So you've talked a little bit about some of the adaptability that your organizations have encountered over the last year. How has this benefited or challenged your operations?
Yes, I believe I started to talk a little bit about that. So when you work adaptability into long-term strategy, you're basically developing a resiliency plan. And by being able to set forth early planning of adaptable tools, adaptable methods, policies, programs to be able to implement these strategies when the unexpected comes about, that is actually something that was able to get us through the last 2 years very successfully, having all of these methods in place.
So I'll give you a story to illustrate adaptability. I mentioned that we were 2 legacy organizations that came together during COVID. Those of you in the Charlotte region probably remember the Employers Association, or TEA, that was based here in Charlotte, merged with a group called CAI, Capital Associated Industries, not to be confused with our host today, and formed Catapult in the middle of a pandemic. So think about what happened in that pandemic. People went home. People started doing work on Zoom. People were balancing their family life with their work life. People were not paying attention to what was going on necessarily in businesses outside of their own industry and what was happening in their own lives. Meanwhile, a new company was being born. And so we had an opportunity to brand without a venue or a vehicle in which to do that. That's important on a couple notes. One is for the members and the clients that we served, but also as a talent attraction strategy, right? If you think about what it means to win in this war for talent that all of the previous panels have talked about, people need to know you and what you stand for and who you are and why they want to be part of your team. So I joined Catapult in October of last year after all of the integration things that are necessary needed to happen, right? So you you bring your people together in your HR systems and your technology systems and all of the financials and the things that must be done. But then there's an opportunity to bring people together and to start to attract new talent to be part of the organization going forward. So one of the first things we did during the pandemic as part of this transformation was engage about a third of our organization in describing and defining the mission, vision, and values of the organization. Not only so that we were aligned internally, but so that we could use that externally to go to our members and those who were not members to say, here's the value proposition of our organization. If you need assistance when it comes to people and workforce and HR, those kinds of things, but also as a talent attraction tool for us. And it gave us a solid foundation to think about that visioning statement for the future. If you don't have a solid mission, vision, values, you really can't lead in your own organization. And it becomes a hard thing to attract people to want to be part of that. So that was one of the first things that we did that I think was so fundamental to a brand new organization. And then that led way to our strategic plan and yada, yada, yada. But that was really core for us in the first part of transforming and kind of thinking about the vision for our organization.
Wow, very impactful. A lot of change in just a few short months, but it's exciting to see where you are when you're going. So given the current economic landscape and the market conditions, what advice can you give to organizations on how to strike the balance between long-term strategy and adaptability?
I think, the long-term strategy, if it's not including a comprehensive resiliency and adaptability plan, will not work. There are so many different elements that go into that, and workforce development is one of the top ones, which is why I'm really excited actually about talking what we're going to get into a little bit later with mobility planning and transportation and how that impacts cities. For us, the one of the largest aspects that we could have done during these last two times that really supported our long-term planning is communication. The different types of communication models that we implemented throughout the firm, whether this was a weekly update by our CEO to all, whether it was constant touch points with our teams, making sure that our teams are feeling engaged and that our workforce is always getting the needs that they need to be able to do their best work so that we can really unlock that power of that workforce. If your long-term strategy is taking all of the different elements that impact resiliency, throughout our lifetime, we're going to encounter many events, whether they are at the local level or the national or the global level. So being reflective rather than reactive in the way that you plan your long-term strategy is going to give you the greatest adaptability and the greatest results.
Yeah, I think Irene hit on an important piece around the adaptability of your long-term strategy with what's happening today, right? So it's important to have a clearly defined vision so that you know where you're going as an organization and your people know why it's important to follow that long-term strategy. But you also have to recognize what's going on in the immediacy of the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, right? So it's great to have a long-term strategy, and we did part of that in our defining our mission, vision, values. We went even further and stole a BHAG from those of you who know the big, hairy, audacious goals, and we set out a 5-year vision and said, here's where we want to be in 5 years. We want to become respected as the premier employers association across the Southeast region, not just the Carolinas. That's our big, hairy, audacious goal. Then we had to stair-step that back to people to say, what does that mean for you individually? How do you bring yourself to work every day? How do you contribute to that? And then let's go back to the communication and let's figure out what you as individuals are facing every day when you're bringing yourself to work. The pandemic has forced a lot of people to reprioritize what's important to them. A lot of people, you heard from the earlier panels, they're hiring, right? Because people have decided they're going to leave the workforce or they're going to change careers after 30 years. there just isn't enough talent there. So you have to find a way to hook the people and then respect what's going on in their individual lives. I hope we'll get a chance to talk about workplace wellness, because I think that's a huge thing that has come out of the pandemic, around meeting people where they are and being attuned to individuals, as well as then communicating, how people can get through whatever challenges they're facing today to then help that long-term strategy.
And actually, Cheryl, to that, this is where data becomes really critical. We have a workplace planning and strategy group, so we were able to develop our own work from home surveys that really focused and tailored those questions to what was important to us as an organization. We have then started to do that for our clients as well. The feedback that comes in through the voice of your employees, working that into your long-term strategy so that you are able to adapt, is critical, because then your employees feel like they have their voices are being heard. Your strategy is based on the health and well-being of your workforce. And as Cheryl mentioned, a lot of priorities changed for, I can guarantee, almost 100% of your workforce. And those priorities are going to be represented in the type of give back they give to you as the organization. And those priorities are also going to determine if they stay with you or if they're going to look for opportunities elsewhere. So really leveraging the data that you can extract from your workforce and using that data to plan out your long-term strategies to address and incorporate adaptability is a key component.
Good point. All right, so we're going to get into the meat of this now. So Irene, first question for you. Your firm offers a variety of services, including those in urban design, master planning, and mobility infrastructure planning. With this in mind, why is it essential for both economic and workforce development to continue improving the mobility infrastructure of Charlotte's urban centers?
We heard so much today about the importance of transportation, about mobility, about access, about development. And this question is going to round out a lot of that, because planning for mobility gives direct access to great places that people want to visit, great places that people want to work at. It has the power of unleashing a high-performing workforce. And in order to be successful in the mobility planning, we must approach it from a people-first perspective. What does that mean? That means that we have access to multiple modes of transportation. We are inclusive to multiple levels of income that can access the different modes of transportation. We are planning for pedestrians, for bicycles, for light rails, for trains, planes, automobiles. Currently, Charlotte commutes more than 75, I believe the number is 76.6% of commuters commute in single vehicle cars around Charlotte. As we continue to grow, and we know that we're growing because the last 2 years, if you haven't been in Charlotte, you've probably noticed that there are at least, if not a dozen new high-rises, a dozen new planned high-rises in place. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of square footage in the millions. How are all these people going to be coming to work every day? If we are able to change that 76% and bring it down by introducing better infrastructure that can support people-first transportation methods, we're going to be, again, building in that adaptability for a long-term strategy in Charlotte. I will tell you that, thankfully, the city of Charlotte is a much more reflective city than a reactive city than other cities that we work with across the country. We are currently testing, piloting, modeling, and analyzing the different development projects across the city to see what kind of return on investment these development projects are having on our infrastructure and our planned infrastructure, so that we can plan for better infrastructure in the future. And if we were just to take certain approaches as part of our master plan, for example, If we were to look at transit-oriented development and go to 50% of our future growth towards transit-oriented development, we are already leaving parts of Charlotte natural and untouched for future use. Additionally, we heard earlier about that private-public partnership. It is critical that we have private-public partnership in our goals towards mobility and transportation planning. And we can do this in many different ways. We can do it as corporations, we can do it as developers, we can do it as building owners, we can do it as institutions by partnering with our city to really reinforce the different multimodal methods that the city is looking to implement. And how do we do this? Well, as a corporation, we can leverage our own infrastructure as a corporation, as well as our policies and our programs to our employees to really leverage multimodal transportation sources. And how do we do that? If we're a corporation with a corporate campus, we can start to really analyze the different bicycle paths, pedestrian paths that the city is implementing and tap those into our campus to maximize how our employees go from a city infrastructure down into the private infrastructure. We can also offer different incentives to our employees so that they are incentivized to use different modes of transportation. We can also start to build and incorporate better bicycle and scooter infrastructure on our campuses and within our buildings, as well as in general, a public transportation infrastructure that we can incorporate into our assets, into our buildings. This can be anything from a concierge that helps your employees identify where the best location for a bus stop is, what time the bus schedule is. We can leverage technology to do that in the form of digital displays across our lobbies, in the form of apps that our workforce can use to really be able to tap into all of the different modalities that will get our people to and from the office. And this is important, again, because it provides access. It provides access to our buildings. It provides access to amenities. If you are a corporation that may have multiple real estate assets, you can start to offer your employees access to amenities outside of the buildings that they are currently assigned to. It also allows for the workforce to be able to run errands, make different visits to different parts of the city within their lunch hours. It also allows them access to after-work activities. And when we are providing access, we are unleashing the power of our workforce.
Wow, that's some good stuff. And you know, it's happening so fast here in Charlotte. It amazes me. It didn't seem like it was that long ago. I was sitting in a conference room a number of years ago now, but it seemed like yesterday. And Michael Smith with Charlotte Center City Partners was talking about the vision for the rail trail. And I remember sitting there like thinking, that is so cool, but that's not gonna happen in my lifetime. And here it is now. I mean, South End is just bustling, and it's just so exciting to see people with their scooters and their bikes and just all the different things, way they're getting around, and all the new high rises that have gone up in the South End area because of that development. Cheryl, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think the one thing that I would add to that, not to take away anything from what Irene has said and what any of our earlier panelists have said, we have to focus on infrastructure in our city. If you think about what makes businesses work, people make businesses work, right? People are at the core of what we do every day in our organizations. Absent probably some pushback that I would get from our folks in the technology field, I would argue that people make businesses run. And so we have to invest in our people until we get to the point where AI takes over and we get to the Matrix movie, right, where the machines are running the people. You have to focus on that side of it. And so I'll use that maybe as a tee up for perhaps a specific question you'd like to address to me.
And here we go. Okay, Cheryl. As an organization with the mission of helping employers address their biggest challenges in creating exceptional workplaces, how would you advise businesses who are struggling with the lack of available skilled labor? And how can businesses foster and nurture a business environment that supports workforce development in an organic and thoughtful way?
So you don't need me to sit up here and tell you that there is a labor shortage, right? Brendan talked a little bit earlier about the supply and demand challenges that we're facing. And I would venture to say that most of you, if not all of you in this organization, have a "we're hiring" sign on your website or on your doors somewhere. We just can't find enough skilled labor. And one of the biggest questions that we get from employers is, look, we've tried everything. We are doubling our salaries. We are increasing our benefits. We're giving unlimited PTO. We're trying to rethink about our hybrid work schedule, going to the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that was referenced a little bit earlier. We have tried everything. Like, help us. We cannot find talent. Right. So I think what we've started to hear from some of those employers is you have to get even more creative about this. You have to dig deeper into the K-12 pipeline. You have to be thinking about not just internships and apprenticeships at the college level. You need to be thinking about that at the high school level, at the 8th grade level, at the middle school level, right? There's lots of programs out there now designed around building women in STEM fields. I hope that I will see that in my lifetime, that we have a strong population of women who are in STEM fields, but that started with 3rd graders, right? And it started with a woman who was thinking about, how do I build that talent pipeline early in the system? We've also seen employers that are going into non-traditional pipelines. For a long time, the military was overlooked as a viable pipeline of talent. And yet, if you think about individuals in the military, highly skilled, highly expert, even if their resume has to be classified because of what they were doing in the military, doesn't mean that they're not a viable candidate. So we've seen a lot more employers tap into the military pipelines. We're even starting to see more employers think differently about their HR protocols to hire those who had previously been incarcerated, right? There's a population of the incarcerated who had misdemeanors or minor felonies that they now can think about their own workplace and tap into that talent pipeline as well. So, lots of different ways to go deeper into the workforce pipeline. And then on the other end, thinking about creating flexible work environments. So we've already talked about the hybrid schedule and whether or not you're going to bring people into an uptown office and create the economies around that, where they're spending their time and their dollars at their lunch break and they're getting their hair done in an uptown salon. We're also seeing employers who are thinking differently about their own workplaces to make them more attractive. So I'll give you one example of an organization that we work with who is in manufacturing. Manufacturing has typically been 3 shifts. You have the day shift, you have the night shift, you have the overnight shift, right? You have 3 shifts a day. This employer said, we cannot compete with our competitors in this space by just staying status with the way manufacturing has worked. So as an alternative, they have created 16 shifts. 16 different shifts to appeal to the workforce that might want to come in for a 4-hour shift, and it doesn't fit in the 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. slot, right? They've thought about a 2-hour shift. What about all of the women who've been in at home who then want to come back into the workforce, and that traditional 8-hour shift doesn't work for them? They have been very successful just rethinking their own business model to appeal to the new workforce. And by the way, they have a wait list to work at that organization, right? So just thinking differently, yes, about your talent pipelines, but also about how you're changing your own business to appeal to the current workforce, I think is important.
Wow. It's nice to see some creativity. Yeah. All right, ladies, as we look towards the future, in what ways do you hope to see the region leverage its growing economy to enhance and improve its efforts in economic and workforce development moving forward? I'm going to start with this, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think, economic and workforce development go hand in hand. I am a reformed educator, spent 32 years working in higher education. I was one of those people during the pandemic that had one of those epiphanies that there were other jobs to do outside of it. But I've spent a lot of time in the connection between economic and workforce development. And they go hand in hand, right? When a business comes to the Charlotte region, the number one question that they ask is, what is the availability of talent? What does the labor force look like? My good friend, Dr. Diedemeyer over there, the president of CPCC, has been asked to many, many conversations when we have an economic development project at the table. All of our higher ed institutions do, because an employer like Honeywell doesn't pick the Charlotte region without a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the tax incentives and a lot of the economic incentives that come with it, if they don't know that they can't find the labor in this market to support their workforce. So I think that public-private partnership that Tracy kicked us off with, talking about the public sector, the government sector, the individual private corporations coming together to create the narrative, makes Charlotte a very attractive place to be, because we have all of the infrastructure, we have all of the economic incentives, and we have the workforce here as well.
Yes, and I'm going to go also back to the mobility topic with that one, because I believe that if we have a strong mobility plan that ties the region together, we are unlocking the workforce in many other neighboring cities, towns, and states. We have some of the world's best, or definitely the country's best universities between North Carolina and South Carolina that are only, some of them, less than 2 hours away. We also have other cities, such as, I believe I saw somebody here earlier from the city of Hickory, other cities that are within an hour, hour and a half drive away. So if we start to really think about how all of these regional assets with other cities, other universities, colleges, how we can start to work them into our long-term master plan strategies, and then really leverage the technology tools that we have available to us to collect data that can then drive design. We're hitting it. We're getting at the crossroads of data and design to really create master plan strategies that have the ability to be tested for return on investment, so that we're always analyzing what we're doing. And again, I think we are in a very thoughtful environment here in Charlotte. I believe our leaders do what is best for the city's growth, and really connecting the dots with more of our regional resources will get us there.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. So last question. How do you see Charlotte as a collective building a more resilient and economically viable future for all? Irene.
Providing access for all. Tapping into K through 12, big time, and even before K through 12, pre-K through 12. Our leaders are already doing this. Private corporations are already partnering with the public sector to do this. If we don't continue to invest more and more into our early childhood development, into talent development at the school age level, into talent development in the higher education level, and how all of those investments will one day continue to increase our workforce, which will lead to more economic development, success, and investment in the Charlotte region.
I'm going to steal something Brendan said earlier, which is Charlotte is a great place to live. And I think we just have to continue to own that. We have a lot of things going really well for us. What started as a banking community is very diversified now. It took the visionaries of people like Jim Rogers at Duke Energy to say, we want to be an energy capital. And all of a sudden that sparked 300 energy related businesses that came to the region, small, medium, and large vendors, suppliers, et cetera. It took people at the government level, at the legislative level, in public and private partnerships to bring a med school to Charlotte to diversify our healthcare industry. Right? It took leaders like Gene Woods at Atrium Health and Carl Armato at Novant coming together, not as competitors, but as colleagues, to say we need to create a rich environment for healthcare in our community to build up those areas. So what Charlotte has done really, really well in its past, I think we need to continue doing really, really well, which is partnering with one another. Even though some days we may be competitors, we know at the end of the day we can collaborate and create create a 1 + 1 = 11 instead of 1 + 1 = 3, and really continue to build that through our public-private partnerships, our collaboration, and our focus on community.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all of you. I mean, I'm excited. Charlotte is a great place to be, and thankful to wonderful leaders like this and all of our other panels, and for all of you in the room today for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. And so I'll turn it back over.
Thank you all.
And to close us out, Chris Chapman, who I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, our Executive Director.
Well, good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to thank our panelists, moderators, and I'd also like to personally thank the Blumenthal Performing Arts for this amazing venue and Uptown Catering for providing their services. Let's give them a quick round of applause. A few times this morning, people talked about how much coffee they've had. I'm quite the opposite. My first cup was at 5 a.m., and so bear with me on this one. For those that I haven't had the pleasure to meet over the course of the 3 years that I've been reporting on the Charlotte metro area, my name is Chris Chapman, and I'm the Senior Executive Director of Invest Charlotte, as well as Invest Raleigh-Durham. And for those that I've had the chance to meet, thank you again. It's been great to work with you to put together our last edition of our annual business report here. And I've really gained a wealth of knowledge with all these panelists speaking up here about this fantastic area. Thank you again to the amazing leaders I met during this journey. Your support and our enthusiasm for our work does not go unnoticed. I'm personally blown away by what we've been able to create and accomplish, and I can't wait to start working on next year's edition. Feel free to reach out to me for any recommendations on interviewees. I'm sure there's a lot in this room. I'd also like to mention that we have an amazing audience with us today. And I think that speaks to two things. One, the necessity of what we do, business intelligence as a tool to promote and attract growth and investment to the Charlotte region. And two, I think it speaks to the volume of this business community, a community that leans in, rises above, and my personal favorite, has the mentality of a rising tide lifts all boats. I'd like to personally thank our incredible sponsors for making today possible. Catapult Employers Association, Crescent Communities, Flagship Healthcare Properties, our bronze sponsors, Bernard Robinson & Co., Catalyst Capital Partners, EDIFICE General Contractors, Miles-McClellan Construction, Segra, and Wallbridge, as well as our honored sponsors, the City of Rock Hill, Labella Architecture, McGuire Woods, Petcare Construction, Perkins & Will, Pfeiffer University, Troutman Pepper, and Truliant Federal Credit Union. And thank you again to the Blumenthal, as well as Uptown Catering for helping make today possible. As you leave, please be sure to grab your copy of the Invest Charlotte 2022 book. It's on the table where you guys grabbed breakfast from earlier. You can write to me at cchapman@capitalia.com, as feedback is always welcomed. Last but not least, while Charlotte might be newly released, we have already begun our research on our next edition of Invest Raleigh-Durham. Mark your calendars for the 2nd or 3rd week of January, as we'll be hosting our annual event. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. To our keynote speaker, presenters, moderators, and panelists for your insightful words, as well as our sponsors for supporting our efforts. Thank you all and have a great week ahead.
And then you get 2 turns.